Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday. That means it's time for the Realignment clip. At least it's again time for a Realignment clip. Took a little bit of a break, but we are back. If you guys don't know, Marshall and I have a podcast, The Realignment. Marshall, you'll recognize from filling in for Crystal from time to time. And we have a very good guest we wanted to preview for everybody on the channel. Who is it, Marshall?
Yeah, it's Kyla Scanlon. We have seen so many really cool topics I'm sure you all are hearing about in the news. The Metaverse, Web3, crypto. There's talking about supply chains and inflation. So we brought Kyla on to talk about all of this on this episode last week. Kyla is really great. She is really big on TikTok. She has a really great Substack that a lot of listeners have written in saying they've really enjoyed. So great clip here. Be sure to check out the full length video and subscribe to the Realignment. We come out every Tuesday and Thursday, long form, great break between your episodes of Breaking Points. Here's the clip. Metaverse is actually a deeper, longer term actual topic and issue. So let's just get into that. Like, what is the Metaverse? Like, what are your thoughts on it? All the good stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really exciting what Facebook is doing, rebranding to Meta, because it shows, like, I think how much potential is there, but it definitely was a dystopian thing. If you watched the whole thing, like, it was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to be a part of that world for a lot of people. But I think the Metaverse at large is just this digital physical reality. So instead of us all being on the Zoom call right now, our avatars would be in a digital conference room and it'd be much more engaging. It would be much more consistent. And I think, like, with the biggest thing with the Metaverse is there's that persistent feeling to it. So there isn't like the disruption of going tab to tab like we have on the internet right now. So the whole experience would be much smoother. It'd be much more interactive. You'd be interacting with real people. So, like, you can think of a video game where you're like interacting with all these different people and playing a shooter game or whatever, but you would be doing that like in a boardroom or at a coffee shop. So that's it's just rethinking how we interact online.
Yeah, it's interesting to me whenever I think about it. The cynical take that I've seen is that what Mark really wants to do is to escape the Apple ecosystem. As in, Facebook wants to stop being reliant on Google and Apple in order for people to be able to access and use its products. And instead, they want to become the de facto operating system through which everybody interacts. Is that directionally correct? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Zuck did an interview with Ben Thompson, and the whole thing was like, he's wanted to build something like this for a long time. He's not happy that Facebook is so reliant on all these other brands. He wants to be the operating system of the Metaverse. And I think that's what the whole goal is. And I mean, there's like all sorts of speculation. Is he running away from regulation? Is he running away from like the very bad brand that Facebook has developed? Is he running away from Apple and the all-encompassing being that Apple is? I think that there's probably a lot of different variables that play into that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Could you speak to why people should be excited about the Metaverse? Because Kyla, we've done stuff at On Deck. I enjoy speaking with you. I'm not quite sure I'm looking forward to sitting in a virtual conference room with you doing this type of thing. And obviously we're content creators. So actually, to a certain degree, that probably will be a bit easier to do this. But why is your normal internet consuming person who mostly interacts through mobile, they're not even probably on a desktop or a laptop, why is that something that people are hypothetically excited about?
So I don't think that many people are that excited about it. I think that, there's sort of the pandemic energy, like we're on almost the other side of this big pandemic where we all were inside for a year. And so I think like that original idea was very, very appealing during that time. But there's like other applications to the Metaverse you have education. So like kids now, how can they learn better? Because rote memorization probably isn't going to be the answer to having like a successful educational system. It's going to be how can they actually have immersive online education, and the Metaverse is an answer to that. And then I think with commerce too, so like how do you shop online, e-commerce? So I think the Metaverse could be another answer to that. But in terms of like how we engage, I mean, a couple of applications would be like for a workplace, you're going to potentially have less like idea to execution friction if you're operating in a virtual boardroom where everybody is like actually there. But I think for social engagement, like there could be incrementally some benefit, but I think think most of the time we are still human creatures. Like we still have these almost animalistic needs to like be around other people. And so I think that maybe that part won't take off as quickly as we think it will. But then also like you have to zoom out and be like, okay, we do exist on twitter.com and we engage there. So this could just be twitter.com, but in the metaverse sort of thing too. Yeah.
I wonder how people are thinking about, yes, it's true. People are on Twitter, Facebook, all of that. But as you alluded to, I mean, nobody really, like, there is just something to doing something in person. Like, there is if anything, being hyper online has produced a deeper appreciation in a lot of people to kind of reject a lot of what we're seeing. We see millennials, people like, or even Zoomers, most of the people want to go back to the office, or they want some sort of hybrid, schedule, as in they want the option, because that's actually where the sociability comes in. Is older people who actually much prefer working from home exclusively. How do you think that plays out in terms of how this metaverse actually comes to be?
So this is something I've been thinking a lot about, is sort of this return to analog. So I'm on the cusp of a Gen Z. So I just turned 24. So kind of sit there. And something interesting that's happened is Gen Z people have started to wear wired headphones. And so it's like, if they're starting to wear wired headphones, like, why do we think that they're going to be gung-ho to like go into the metaverse? Like, I think there's going to be this return to simplicity. So I totally agree with you. It's going to be really hard to convince people like, oh no, don't go into a physical office, go online, go on Zoom like you were for most of your college experience because of, unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah.
Wait, why? I've seen this, but what's the actual articulation of why Gen Z is using wired headphones? Because I will say, out of all the different tech products we can joke about, I actually love AirPods. AirPods are great. They are straightforward. They're very comfortable. It's actually very annoying to do things with wired analog versions there. What's actually going on there?
I think there's a couple arms to it. Like, I think it's the aesthetic. So you kind of want to have like that wired aesthetic. You want people to like know that you're listening to music. I think it's very much like a signaling tool. And then I think there's a couple other theories about like why, like from like just a nostalgia perspective, sort of having that instead of having the AirPods. So I think it's a couple of those things. It's just like people just want to return to a simpler time and they have nostalgia for that. And also they like the way it looks.
That's so funny, given that I hated wired headphones so much. I was one of those early adopters of the very uncool ring that goes around your neck for Bluetooth, just so I could take phone calls like this. So listen, Gen Z, I'm never going back, because it actually was a gigantic pain in the ass, especially while exercising. One of the things I do want to get your opinion on here is Web3. I'm hearing a lot about Web3. I know I'm supposed to care about it, but I'm going to be honest. I find most of it utterly indecipherable. And I'm unable to decide whether this is being wish casted into existence by people who have a major financial interest in making this a thing, whether it's a genuinely revolutionary social movement. Where should I fall on that spectrum? What do you think it is in its most basic form? And I'm speaking on behalf right now of a lot of listeners who know that it's a thing, but have no idea what the hell it is.
Yeah. So it's like this probably isn't the best example or explanation, but it's sort of like the decentralized Web3. So everything that you have on sort of your Web2 platform, like would it be Twitter, Instagram, however, like that's sort of the decentralized version of it. So in Web3, you're going to have DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations. So instead of having an LLC, you'd have a DAO where people who have tokens that represent ownership in the DAO can vote on how the organization is going to proceed. So instead of having like a bunch of people in boardrooms making decisions, it's going to be the community making decisions. And then from like an ownership perspective, everything is monetizable in Web3. So you have these NFTs. So it's crazy. Like everybody wants you to NFT every single thing that you've ever done. And that enables like a lot of cool monetization aspects, but then it's also like, how much do we need to financialize about our lives? And so everything is just sort of the ownership is spread out, but it's also a way for people to collectively own things. So that's kind of how you can think about it. Yeah.
Kyla, as someone who makes her living through explaining these narrative ideas, can you speak to what's going on with the Web3 discourse? Because what's really interesting to me and we're going to have to hit this in the introduction to make sure this is all clear, is that everything we're talking about here, Web 2 to Web 3, decentralized autonomous organizations, NFTs, all these different ideas feel really cool. And they directionally are very cool. But I just know that no matter what we do, this conversation is going to go over the heads of a huge percentage of our audience. And then another funny dynamic you'll see whenever you run into people in real life is people will basically whisper to one another. I was just in Miami. Well, we were both just in Miami. Hey, I don't actually get what's going on with Web3. Like, we know that it's cool. We know we probably didn't buy as much Bitcoin as we wanted to buy or should have bought in 2012, but we would have thought that Bitcoin was uncool back then. So we don't want to make that mistake again. So we're just going to talk about this. Can you just talk about these moments where there's this new idea that hasn't actually translated into the real world, yet our audiences are frankly trying to still engage with it? Because this is, I think, what Sagar and I are both personally struggling with.
Mhm. Yeah. Is it just like the understanding, or just like how do you even take the first
Well,
step?
all of it. Here's the thing. A first step would necessitate understanding to a certain degree.
Sure.
So how do you just think about this as someone who translates ideas to an audience?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard. I honestly would argue 95% of people who are in Web3 don't know what Web3 is, because like right now, they're building the community, the world, they're building the train when the train's like running down the tracks. So you're like putting the wheels on and the thing's still rolling as fast as it can go. And they're like trying to build up as it's going. So the space is just moving so quickly right now. And there's so much innovation and there's so much creation that it's really hard to keep up with. So I think like if you're just like, what is Web3? It's sort of like taking all these concepts that we have in Web 2. So how you have ownership in an organization, right? Like you are an employee for an organization. In Web 3, you would be sort of an employee, but you'd also have a stake in that company. So you would benefit if that company did well, versus now, most people, like if you're a barista at Starbucks, like you don't really benefit if Starbucks stock goes up. You just work there. But if you were a barista at the Starbucks DAO, you would have token ownership in that DAO, and you would be able to benefit if Starbucks did a good job. You'd also, depending on the amount of tokens that you owned, in tokens representing ownership in Starbucks here, you could decide like, oh, Starbucks isn't going to release pumpkin spice lattes this year. You could vote on that. And everything is voted on by this collective community. And the community can sometimes pool together their money. So if you think of like, maybe I'm trying to think, like if you're going on a road trip with friends, like maybe you'll pull together $50 each and to go get some snacks. It's kind of like that here. So you're going to pull together your money, but instead of going to buy snacks for your road trip, you're going to go buy like different NFT art pieces that you can own as a collective unit. And so instead of like having the individual be siloed, it's going to be a community. That's kind of like the overarching thesis. But I would say like all this stuff is still being iterated on and being worked through. I would say like most of this, a lot of it hasn't come to fruition yet, but that's the general idea. Yeah.
Let's go back to even more basics. What is Web 2? Are we living in Web 2? Are we on the cusp of Web 3? And what was Web 1?
Yeah. So Web 2 is kind of like the flat internet hierarchy that we have now, where we have the social media engagement, where we can like go into sort of like, Zoom, like kind of like this, I would say is Web 2, like being able to see each other. Web 1 is probably like the very first iteration of the internet, where you had AOL, where you had like dial up and things like that. But Web 2 is sort of like this next level of interaction, that next level of engagement, where you do have these online communities, where you do have, quote unquote, you're making friends online. We spend way more of our time online than we did in sort of the Web 1 era. And so I guess that's like kind of one barometer that you could use is like, theoretically, in the Web 3 world, we'll be spending like 99% of our time immersed in an online space.
This is interesting because, and once again, this is where we wanted to speak with you, because you're doing a great job of highlighting the idea-centric part of this. But something I'm wondering about, because I guess, Sagar, you and I became internet conscious during the real start of that Web 2 era, aka we're getting on Facebook, we are designing our MySpace unique things, MySpace top 8, reference to those older viewers who remember this. But basically, I don't think at the time there needed to be all this like hyper intellectualizing everything. So if you think about the first time you heard about Facebook, Sagar, someone was like, hey, there's this site and you could have all your friends on it. And unlike MySpace, it's not really gross and weird because it's more straightforward and you can just use it. And I was like, okay, cool. And I signed up. I was at Debate Camp in 2006. It was really cool. I was like, this is awesome. But with Web3, and this is where the skepticism comes in, you see a lot of people just like, even in your Starbucks DAO story, I've seen people like unironically tweet some version of that. I'm sort of like, maybe, like maybe that's a thing. So it's interesting. It's not even that the train is getting built as it's going down the tracks. It's that there aren't probably even tracks in the first place, and there definitely isn't a destination, but there's a financial incentive to describe there being a set of tracks and a destination.